Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to the Asma Jahangir conference and one of our first sessions that's going to start now. And the session is titled The Politicization of Religion and Its Impact on Minorities. And we have esteemed guests with us to discuss this topic. Let's start with the introduction of these guests. I hope all of you are seated and ready for the session. I can see a lot of people standing at the back. अगर सब लोग बैठ जाए तो ये सेशन हम लोग शुरू कर लेंगे. एक हमारे गेस्ट को थोड़ा सा जाना भी है तो इस वजह से. So सबसे पहले मैं इंट्रोड्यूस करूँगी जस्टिस शहराम साहब को, जस्टिस शहराम सरवर साहब को. He is a sitting judge of the Lahore High Court and he will deliver for us the keynote address for the session. Then we have the Federal Minister for Human Rights, Mr. Khel Das Kohistani. He is a prominent Pakistani politician and he has also served as the member of National Assembly. And as I call your names, it would be my honor if you would come and seat yourselves. Justice Saab, aap bhi aa jaiye upari. Khel Das Kohistani Saab, the Federal Minister for Religious Affairs. We have with us the former UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion and Belief, Mr. Ahmed Shahid. Mary James Gill, who's a former parliamentarian and advocates for human rights and minorities' rights. She has done commendable work regarding marginalized workers through her campaign called Sweepers Are Superheroes. I think a bit of clapping for our panelists would be good to welcome them. And we have Jaya Jaggi, who's a young human rights activist. She's the voice of the youth, and she's going to give us her opinion on this topic. We have our last panelist is Mr. Farooq Haider Maududi, who is an Islamic scholar. He's the son of Abul Ala Maududi Sahab, and he will be presently here. So I would like to begin the session by requesting Justice Shahram to deliver the keynote address. Justice Shahram, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished members of the bar, respected scholars, representative of civil society, dear colleague and friends, I'm grateful to the organizers of annual Asma Jahangir conference for inviting me to participate in this important panel. It's a privilege to speak at a forum that bears the name of Asma Jahangir, an advocate whose life's work remind us the constitutionalism, pluralism, and human dignity, and are not abstract ideals, but lived commitments that must be defended with courage and consistency. It is impossible to begin without paying tribute to late Asma Jahangir, whose name has become inseparable from the struggle of democracy, human rights, and judicial independence in Pakistan. Asma was not merely a great lawyer, she was a moral force. She understood perhaps better than most that law is not neutral when injustice prevails. Her advocacy, whether for political prisoners, religious minorities, women, or those condemned to death, was grounded in an unwavering belief in human dignity and constitutional supremacy. She challenged dictators, confronted abuse of power, and spoke uncomfortable truths in times when silence was rewarded and dissent punished. Yet, she did not as an ideologue, but as a constitutionalist. Her loyalty was never to a government, a party, or a personality. It was to the Constitution and to the idea that every human life has worth. Now, these were all my written views about Asma. I can speak an hours and hours about Asma, as we were together, as we started our bar politics together, as we started contesting elections together. She was elected president in 2011 of Supreme Court Bar Association. Then she supported our friend Mr. Yasin Azad from Sindh. And then she not only supported me, rather she not only persuaded, rather compelled me to contest the election of Lahore High Court Bar. And I did it, and I became the president. Mr. Yasin and myself were together. He was the president of Supreme Court Bar Association, and I was the president of Lahore High Court Bar Association. And we cannot explain the time, both of us, I can speaking even on his behalf. I can speak on his behalf. I am authorized, he has authorized me, that we cannot forget the moments we spent with Asma. She was larger. Seriously, I have no reservation. She was larger than life. She was full of qualities. So let's come back to the topic, because I can speak, an hours for Asma. The theme, therefore, before us today, the politicization of religion and its impact on minorities. It's complex, sensitive, and deeply consequential. It touches upon questions of identity, power, law, and justice. Well, as a serving judge, I approached this subject with restraint, mindful of institutional boundaries, yet conscious of the judiciary's responsibility to engage thoughtfully with issues that affect the constitutional order and the lived realities of citizens. And the religion occupies a central place in the moral and social life of our society. The Constitution of Pakistan recognizes this reality. At the same time, it establishes a constitutional order founded on rule of law, equity, and fundamental rights. Our constitutional history reflects an ongoing effort to reconcile faith with governance, from the objective resolution to its incorporation into the substantive text of Constitution. Religion has been acknowledged as source of values, yet the Constitution simultaneously affirms the sovereignty. That sovereignty is exercised through its institutions, not through coercion, exclusion, or political mobilization against vulnerable groups. The politicization of religion begins when religious identity is transformed from a source of personal belief into a tool of political legitimacy or contestation, when it's invoked not to inspire ethical conduct, but to define who belongs and who does not. When religions become politicized, its impact on religious minorities is often immediate and tangible. Minorities may experience social exclusion or stigmatization, barriers to equal participation in public life, disproportionate vulnerability to accusations, violence, or legal misuse, erosion of confidence in law enforcement and justice delivery. From a judicial perspective, such impacts raise serious constitutional concerns. The rule of law requires that law be applied without fear, favor, and prejudice. Where identity becomes a proxy for guilt or suspicion, due process is compromised. Courts are frequently called upon to examine whether state action or inaction has failed to protect minority citizens from harm. In doing so, the judiciary must navigate difficult terrain, respecting religious sensitivities while enforcing constitutional guarantees with firmness and neutrality. Asma Jahangir understood, perhaps more clearly than most, that minority rights are not peripheral concern. They are a test of constitutional sincerity. She consistently argued that the strength of a legal system is measured not by how it treats the majority, but how it protects the vulnerable. Her advocacy for religious minorities was grounded in constitutional text, international human rights norms, and a deep belief in equal citizenship. She reminded us often uncomfortably that silence in the face of injustice is itself a form of complicity. Yet, she also believed in institutions. She engaged courts, invoked law, and insisted that constitutional remedies matter. Her legacies challenge the legal community to defend minority rights not as a charity, but as a constitutional duty. The responsibility of safeguarding minority rights does not rest with the judge alone. The bar plays a critical role, or often the first line of defense for those who feel excluded or threatened. Ethical advocacy, competent representation, and respect for professional standards are essential to maintaining public confidence in justice. To young lawyers and law students, I offer this reflection. The defense of minority rights is not a niche practice. It is central to constitutional law. It requires patience, preparation, and moral clarity. Advocacy grounded in law, not outrage, strengthens institutions. Advocacy that respects the dignity of all parties strengthens democracy. Ultimately, the challenge of politicized religion cannot be addressed solely through litigation or legislation. It requires a constitutional ethos, a shared commitment among institutions and citizens to the principles of equality, tolerance, and the lawful governance. Such an ethos does not demand uniformity of belief, it demands respect for difference, confidence in law, and rejection of violence, and exclusion as tools of persuasion. The Constitution provides the framework. It is for institutions, including courts, the bar, the executive, the civil society, to give the framework life. Distinguished participants, the question before us is not whether religion has a place in society. It undeniably does. The question is whether law will remain the common language through which we manage difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justice Saab. Justice Sharam has set the agenda and he has explained the importance of equal citizenship, of how, and he has explained how minorities are regularly socially excluded and what we must do about it. I would like to ask the first question from the Federal Minister, and I would like to invite you here, sir, to answer the question. My question is, in the recent years, we have seen a lot of cases of forced conversion, and that's been happening at a ground level with political patronage. How do you see this as a federal minister when you see political help being given to certain elements that are involved in such conversions? Because a lot of them are obviously most of them are forced.
بہت شکریہ آنریبل گیسٹ اینڈ ایکسیلنسی. میں آسما جہانگیر کانفرنس میں میری شرکت یہ میرے لیے اعزاز ہے. آپ نے مجھے موقع دیا اور کہ میں اس ڈسکشن کا حصہ بنوں. آسما جہانگیر کانفرنس میں یہ ایک اہم ٹاپک پہ ہمیں مدعو کیا گیا ہے، باقی فرینڈس بھی بات کریں گے۔ پاکستان کا آئین تمام شہریوں کو مساوی حقوق اور آزادی کی ضمانت دیتا ہے، اور تمام مذاہب کے لوگوں کو یہ آزادی حاصل ہے، بلکہ قیام پاکستان سے پہلے بابا قوم قائد اعظم محمد علی جناح صاحب نے فرمایا تھا، اور یہ ہمارے لیے ایک دستاویز ہے، اور آئین پاکستان اور اسلام میں بھی تمام غیر مسلموں کے حقوق کی بات کی گئی ہے، اور کوئی دین جبر کی اجازت نہیں دیتا ہے۔ آئین پاکستان بھی کسی زبردستی کی اجازت نہیں دیتا ہے۔ جو ہندو میرج ایکٹ ہے 2017 میں نیشنل اسمبلی میں جب پی ایم ایل این کی گورنمنٹ تھی، پہلی دفعہ وہاں پہ ایک منظور ہوا، اور 3 صوبوں نے اس ریزولیشن کے تھرو، بلوچستان، پنجاب اور کے پی کے 3 صوبوں نے اس کو اڈاپٹ کیا، اور سندھ گورنمنٹ نے الگ ایک ایکٹ پاس کیا جو امپلیمنٹ بھی ہو رہا ہے۔ اور اب یہ ضرور ہے کہ جیسے ابھی ایک نیشنل اسمبلی سے بل پاس ہوا ہے 18 ایئر کے جو شادی کا بل ہے، جیسے سندھ میں بھی یہ قانون موجود ہے۔ جب قانون بھی موجود ہے، امپلیمنٹ بھی ہو رہا ہے، مگر اس میں ضرور رکاوٹیں آتی ہے، تو اس کا مذہب سے تعلق تو نہیں ہے۔ اگر کوئی 18 سال سے بچی چھوٹی ہندو ہو مسلم ہو، شادی تو قانون نہیں ہونی چاہیے، یہ لا نہیں اجازت دیتا۔ جس طرح ابھی ہم نے نیشنل اسمبلی میں یہ بل پاس ہوا ہے، اور اس پہ اس کے خلاف بھی آوازیں اٹھ رہی ہے کہ وہ نہیں ہونا چاہیے۔ یہ ہونا چاہیے۔ کوئی بھی 12 سال کی 13 سال کی بچی کوئی مرضی سے یا کوئی اٹھا کے اس کو لے کے جائے، تو جب جج کے سامنے، میں تو کہتا ہوں کہ یہ گورننس کا معاملہ ہے، انصاف کا معاملہ ہے۔ کوئی بچی پیش کی جاتی ہے، پہلے تو اسے پوچھا جائے، مذہب کی تو بات کی بات ہے کہ وہ بچی 12 سال کی کیسے شادی کر سکتی ہے، تو یہاں سے کہانی شروع ہو جاتی ہے۔ تو ضرور اس میں یہ جو مذہبی شدت پسندی ہے، اس کے اثرات ہیں، ان قانونوں پہ ہوتی ہے، ان لوگوں پہ بھی ہوتی ہے۔ ظاہر ہم سب سوسائٹی کا حصہ ہیں، تو یہ جو خوف ہے، اس خوف سے یہ قانون بھی متاثر ہوتا ہے، یہ سوسائٹی بھی متاثر ہوتی ہے، یہ کمیونٹی بھی متاثر ہوتی ہے۔ تو ہم سب کو مل کر اس پہ ڈائلاگ کرنا چاہیے، اور یہ جو قانون بنتے ہیں، یا کوئی اپنے دل پہ سوچے کہ میری 12 سال کی بیٹی کو میں کیسے شادی کروا سکتا ہوں، 14 سال کی بیٹی کیسے 11 سال کی شادی کر سکتا ہوں۔ ہمارے ہندو مذہب میں تو نہیں اجازت ہے کہ ہم اس طرح 12 سال 10 سال کی بچی کو شادی کروا لیں۔ 18 سال کے بعد وہ خود ہی فیصلہ کریں۔ تو یہ ایک پرابلم ہے، حقائق ہیں جس پہ ہم چھپا نہیں سکتے، اس پہ کھل کے بات کرنی چاہیے، ڈیبیٹ ہونا چاہیے۔ یہ نہیں ہونا چاہیے، یہ ناانصافی ہے۔ پوسٹ کنورژن کے لیے 12 سال 13 سال 14 سال کی بچی، پھر انصاف نہ ملنا، کئی رنکل کماریاں اس طرح عدالتوں سے ان کی فیملیز جو ہے رو کر رسوا ہو کر چلے گئے۔ کئی ایسی بچیاں ہزاروں کی تعداد میں، نہیں ہونا چاہیے۔ ہم یہی کہتے ہیں کہ امپلیمنٹ ہونا چاہیے قانون جو بھی ہے۔ ہمارے گورنمنٹ نے 2017 میں بھی یہ ایکٹ پاس کیا، ابھی بھی ہماری گورنمنٹ نے نیشنل جو پہلی ہماری کیبنٹ تھی اس میں نیشنل پالیسی بنائی انٹرفیتھ ہارمنی کی۔ اسی طرح یہ بل پاس ہوا ہے 18 ایئر کے جو شادیوں کا ہے، یہ سب کے لیے فائدہ ہوگا۔ میں سمجھتا ہوں یہ ہندو مسلم کا مسئلہ نہیں ہے، یہ جو بھی 18 سال سے کم بچی ہے۔ تو ریاست اور حکومت پاکستان، وزیر اعظم شہباز شریف صاحب کا واضح ویژن ہے، جس طرح ہم نے نیشنل مائنارٹی کمیشن ہے، فرسٹ ٹائم، پہلے 2020 میں وہ ایک کاغذ کا ٹکڑا تھا، اس حکومت نے، پہلی کیبنٹ نے، لا منسٹر اعظم نذیر تارڑ صاحب نے پرائم منسٹر کے ویژن کو آگے بڑھاتے ہوئے اس کو ریلیجس افیئر سے، جو میری منسٹری ہے، اس سے نکال کر ہیومن رائٹس میں لے گئے ہیں۔ ہیومن رائٹس منسٹری نے یہ بل ایکٹ پاس ہو گیا ہے اور اس کی بل کی اب وہ ہیومن رائٹس کے انڈر منارٹی کمیشن کا کام کرے گی اور تمام صوبوں سے ان کی نمائندگی ہوگی اور تمام صوبوں سے جو 2 ممبرس ہوں گے اس میں ایک خواتین ہوگی نان مسلم اور سب صوبوں سے جیسے پنجاب میں کرسچن کمیونٹی ہے تو ڈامیننسی ان کی ہے, سندھ میں ہندو کمیونٹی ہے ان کی ڈامیننسی ہوگی تو پہلا نمبر ان کا ہوگا. تو تمام جو ریلیجس کے اندر جو ہیں ان کو بھی نمائندگی دی گئی ہے, خواتین کو بھی دی گئی ہے اور یہ ہیومن رائٹس کے اندر, اور یہ ٹیک اپ کرے گی فورس کنورژن کے ایشوز ہوں یا کوئی اس طرح کے جو ڈے ٹو ڈے کوئی زیادتی ناانصافی ہوتی ہے اس کو ٹیک اپ کرے گی. تو میں سمجھتا ہوں حکومت پاکستان کی یہ ذمہ داری ہے اور ذمہ داری ہم محسوس کرتے ہیں. اور میں ایک بات اور بھی اگر آپ کی اجازت ہو کرنا چاہتا ہوں, یہ ہمیں بتانا چاہیے دنیا کو کہ پاکستان اس وقت جو مذہبی ہم آہنگی کے لیے جو کردار ادا کر رہا ہے, یہ مذہبی ہم آہنگی صرف اس ملک کے اندر کا نہیں, سرحدوں کے باہر کا بھی مسئلہ ہے. جس طرح یہ 10 مئی کے بعد جو پاکستان ہے, جو میں نے فیل کیا میں بتانا چاہتا ہوں کہ 10 مئی کے بعد پاکستان جو بھارت کی طرف سے پاکستان پہ اٹیک کیا گیا وہ مذہب کی بنیاد پہ کیا گیا. یہ 2 ملکوں کی لڑائی ہو سکتی ہے, 2 مذہبوں کی لڑائی نہیں ہے, ہندو یا اسلام مذہب کی لڑائی نہیں ہے, مگر اسلام کو نشانہ بنایا گیا. پاکستان نے واضح کیا کہ ہم اس کے جواب میں کسی مندر پہ کسی سویلین پہ حملہ نہیں کریں گے. اور یہ پاکستان نے پہلی دفعہ, میری 50 سال کی زندگی میں سمجھتا ہوں یہ پاکستان ہے جنہوں نے یہ بتایا کہ ہماری لڑائی, ہم آپ کے جہاز گرا سکتے ہیں مگر ہم آپ کے مذہب پہ حملہ نہیں کریں گے. تو اس سے بڑی ذمہ داری میں سمجھتا پاکستان نے دی ہے. میں اور یہ سب کو پیغام جانا چاہیے. بہت شکریہ.
شکریہ بہت بہت آپ کا. تھینک یو فار یور آنسر. اسی بات کو لے کے ہم آگے چلتے ہیں. پولیٹیسائزیشن آف ریلیجن کی جب بات ہوتی ہے تو بہت سارے ایشوز ذہن میں آتے ہیں. ایک اور ایشو ہے نیشنل کمیشن آف مائنورٹیز جو کہ ایک نیا اس وقت اسٹیبلش ہوا ہے. جیا جگی سے میں پوچھنا چاہوں گی. جیا از اے voice from the young section of society, and that's important because this is the rising, these are the people who are now rising, and we need to hear their voice. جیا, آپ نے کافی کام کیا ہوا ہے, نہ صرف فورس کنورژنس کے اوپر آپ نے کافی ایکٹیویزم کی ہے بلکہ آپ نے مائنورٹیز کمیشن کے اوپر بھی کافی کام کیا ہوا ہے. آپ مجھے یہ بتائیے کہ اس کو سول سوسائٹی کی طرف سے کہا جا رہا ہے اور مائنورٹی رائٹس ایکٹیوسٹ کی طرف سے یہ کہا جا رہا ہے اٹس اے ٹوتھ لیس کمیشن. بنا تو دیا ہے بٹ اٹ از ناٹ دیٹ امپاورڈ. سو ڈو یو ہیو اینی تھنگ ٹو سے ٹو دس؟
Thank you so very much. Asma Jahangir and Kamala Bhasin, whom we saw on screen, are the 2 women I feel honored to not just follow their footsteps by speaking over here, but also follow their legacy by contributing to the movements. I keep on meeting special rapporteurs, people who work in UN mechanisms, and I do believe that this conversation might be really important, but I do hope that they have translation because at this point in time, I believe that the conversation that I want to have around minority rights and forced faith conversions, you might all have seen on reports, activists, government officials must have shared it with you personally at platforms, but the people sitting who are actually going to take this movement ahead regarding minority rights would not be able to get it without speaking in our local language and or the national language Urdu. And with your permission, Zari, I would like to switch. Regarding the commission, there are different views. یہاں میں جو بھی گفتگو کروں گی شاید بہت سے لوگ اس سے اختلاف کرتے ہوں. I respect the opinion, but the opinion would be appreciated only if that doesn't lie on the cost of women, minority or anyone's lives. آپ difference of opinion یہ تو کر سکتے ہیں کہ یہ کلر زیادہ خوبصورت ہے, بٹ آپ ڈفرینس آف اوپینین اس بات میں نہیں رکھ سکتے کہ ارلی میرج ہونی چاہیے یا نہیں ہونی چاہیے. آپ ڈفرینس آف اوپینین اس بات میں نہیں رکھ سکتے کہ ایک انسان کو قتل کرنا چاہیے یا نہیں کرنا چاہیے. فریڈم آف ریلیجن اینڈ بلیف کے اوپر دیر کین ناٹ بی اے ڈفرینس آف اوپینین, اینڈ ود دا رسپیکٹ اینڈ اپریسیشن آئی ول ناٹ ٹیک دیٹ ڈفرینس آف اوپینین. جہاں تک کمیشن کی بات ہے, سنس آئی ہیو بین اے پارٹ آف میٹنگز ود لا منسٹری, آئی ڈو ریئلی ہوپ کہ جو ڈاکومنٹ ہمارے پاس فائنل شکل میں نکلا ہے جس میں یہ مینشن ہے کہ اٹ ول بی ہیونگ فائنینشیل اٹانومی, اٹ وڈ بی ہیونگ پاورس, it would be having powers to take these cases up. مجھے امید ہے کیونکہ مجھے موقع ملا تھا پچھلے کمیشن میں بھی کچھ کنٹریبیوٹ کرنے کا, اینڈ ناؤ سنس اٹس پاسڈ ویل سی, کیونکہ چائلڈ میرج کا لا بھی پاس تو ہمارے پاس سندھ میں ہو چکا ہے, لیکن آپ کو ہر روز ہر لمحے خبر ملتی ہے کہ ایک کم عمر بچی کی شادی ہو گئی. سو ناؤ مے بی بینگ اے ینگ پرسن, since the law is passed, I was a part of these conversations. اس کی جو کمپوزیشن ہے وہ پہلے سے بہت بہتر ہے. میں اب یہ امید کرتی ہوں کہ یہ اس طریقے سے امپلیمنٹ بھی ہوگا, بیکاز if it's not going to be implemented in that manner, ultimately it's the people who have made this law, people who would be contributing. اگر وہ کچھ نہیں کریں گے تو I would be just another hopeless young person who is surviving and breathing in this country. I would really want to mention about forced conversion because I had already shared. جب کمیشن کی بننے کی بات آتی ہے تو مجھے بہت امید ہے کہ یہ کمیشن فورسڈ فیتھ کنورژن کے کیسز کو اتنی ڈیڈیکیشن کے ساتھ پرسو کرے گا جو کوئی اور کمیشن ابھی تک نہیں کر سکا. With appreciation for NCRC, I keep on engaging with them and they do take my reports, they do communicate with me with appreciation on the reports produced by HRCP and NCHR. But اس کے باوجود میں یہ کہنا چاہتی ہوں کہ میں وہ خاتون ہوں جو اس وقت پورے ملک کے جوڈیشل سسٹم سے, لائر سے انتہا کی دکھ ہوں. مجھے کوئی ہوپ نہیں ہے. اینڈ وین آئی سو دا لائرز آؤٹ سائڈ ٹوڈے آئی واز لائک او مائی گاڈ, this country produces this many of young women. Why don't I see these women when I take or try to take up a case of forced faith conversion? Why don't I see them in public spaces when there is a human rights violation? اور جو ابھی ہم politicization of religion کی بات کر رہے تھے, what I have seen is کہ politicization of religion has erased the history, the identity. I come from a dual faith. My family follows Sikhism and Hinduism. I grew up not saying that I am a Hindu because it had such a negative connotation attached to it. مجھے شرم آتی تھی کہتے ہوئے. Few days back, I was on a cab and the driver said, you should pray 5 times a day. And I was like, جی الحمدللہ, I'll do that. میرے اندر اتنی ہمت بھی نہیں ان کو کہنے کی, صرف یہ بتانے کی کہ there are people who might come from a different faith, who might be Christians, because of the fear, because of that politicization that we have talked. اگر انہوں نے کہا ہوتا کہ آپ بلوچستان سے ہیں تو میں فوراً سے کہتی کہ نہیں, I am from Punjab. اس آئیڈینٹی کو میں فوراً سے بتاتی ان کو. Why could I not say this identity of mine and I reflected on it? میں اپنے آپ کو ایکٹیوسٹ کہتی ہوں. I go into spaces and I tell people own these identities, wear these symbols, not just because you believe in that, but you want to mention and make this visible around. اور اس پولیٹائزیشن کی وجہ سے what I have seen is یہ اتنا پولیٹیسائز ہوا ہے ریلیجن کہ now when you try taking up cases or talking about forced faith conversions, and I'm so happy that the first panel over here and when you reached out, I was more than happy that okay, this conversation is going to be at such a national platform. کہ جب آپ فورسڈ فیتھ کنورژن کی بات کرتے ہیں تو اس مذہب کو ایک ٹول بنا دینے کی وجہ سے, جس از, and I'm not talking about theology, I'm not talking about faith, I'm talking about the political sphere, jahan pe majority of the people, and might be a lot of people, even I'm not sure, I'm just making a guess, even on the panel or in the guest, they'll disagree that forced faith conversion doesn't happen. It's all consensus. The parliamentary committee جو ایک زمانے میں بنائی گئی, ان کی رپورٹ اگر آپ دیکھیں تو it says, oh, we have not found any signs of abductions. Oh my God, آپ آئیں میرے ساتھ چلیں, میں آپ کو سندھ لے کے جاتی ہوں, میں آپ کو حسن عبدال لے کے جاتی ہوں, میں آپ کو پنجاب لے کے چلتی ہوں. How could you not find any signs of abduction? اور میں یہاں پہ یہ مینشن کرنا چاہوں گی کہ it's not just abduction. وہ لڑکیاں جن سے میں دسمبر میں خود کیسز سروائیور سے مل کے آئی ہوں, لڑکیاں بھاگ کے آئی ہیں, they are engaged in prostitution. Let's not just call it forced faith conversions, it's human trafficking.
Yes.
And how these women have been recovered, most of these women were recovered by paying the ransom amount, which is around 25 to 50 lakh Pakistani currency, and due to which we were able to recover them. There is a network, and then they moved abroad. This is how we don't even know their identities. When you ask, kahan gaye wo? Where are those women who experienced this? Because they're not anywhere on digital platforms. And I would also like to mention, there are networks, there are traps. I would not shy away saying the name. ہمارے پاس groups ہیں. اگر آپ think tank کی ویب سائٹس پہ جائیں پاکستانی, تو they would say they are renowned religious scholars. Oh my God, how can we call someone a religious scholar جہاں پہ certificates, I would just conclude it, جہاں پہ certificates بنے ہوئے آپ کے پاس پڑے ہیں. The moment a girl is abducted, her name changes, her identity changes, they'll just put a stamp on it and they'll circulate on social media.
Right, you're absolutely
So we
correct.
really
This
need
is
to
happening.
understand.
This is happening on a you know, in
So
Sindh
I
and
really
Punjab
hope that
particularly.
if the commission is made, at
Yeah.
least there would be there would be a commission, there would be a dedicated group of people who will be given not just the name of the commission, but who would be given enough finances, who would be given enough autonomy, enough courage to speak. And just as Asma Jahangir said, I'll not compromise on fundamental rights, I'll not compromise on speaking the truth, experiencing what I have, and I'll not compromise on minority rights, and
Thank
especially
you.
the rights of and
Thank
the
you.
lives of
Thank
young
you so
women.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, you expressed a kind of disappointment not just at the social situation. یہاں پہ معاشرے میں جو جس طرح سے برتاؤ کیا جا رہا ہے, لڑکیوں کو اٹھایا جا رہا ہے, ایبڈکٹ کیا جا رہا ہے. آبویسلی جو یہ پورا فورس کنورژن کا ایک سیناریو ہوتا ہے, ایبڈکٹ کر کے شادی تو ایک بس ایک نام ہے, اٹس جسٹ اے فرنٹ, بیسکلی ہیومن ٹریفکنگ, پروسٹیٹیوشن اور فورسڈ کنورژن ٹو اسلام. And there's a factory, there are factories running in Sindh and also in Punjab. But the ultimate disappointment, I think, lies in the courts and the lack of the courts to handle such cases. اور نہ صرف فورس کنورژن بلکہ کیونکہ ہم ایک بڑے واسٹ ٹاپک کو ڈسکس کر رہے ہیں, ہم پولیٹیسائزیشن آف ریلیجن کی بات کر رہے ہیں, تو جہاں پہ فورس کنورژن کے کیسز ہینڈل نہیں ہو رہے کورٹ میں, اسی طرح سے دوسری سائڈ پہ بلاسفیمی کے بھی کیسز ہیں جو ہینڈل نہیں ہو رہے. ابھی ریسنٹلی ہم لوگ سب نے دیکھا کہ کافی سارے لوگ, ہنڈریڈز آف پیپل, دے ور امپریزنڈ انڈر بیکاز آف این آن لائن, بیکاز آف دیز آن لائن ایلیگیشنز under, you know, by a certain group operating, and these people who were accused of blasphemy, they were jailed. جہاں پہ ایک سائڈ پہ جڑا والا کے اندر جس طرح سے پوری کالونی جلائی گئی تھی دو لوگوں کو الزام لگا کے بلاسفیمی کا, اسی طرح سے اب ایک ٹرینڈ بن چکا ہے کہ آن لائن کوئی بھی انسان کچھ بھی کہے یا فارورڈ کرے, ٹویٹ کرے, بلاسفیمی کا کیس لگا دیا جاتا ہے. اور اب تو تھوڑا سا شاید کم ہو گیا ہے, جس طرح اعظم نذیر تارڑ صاحب نے آج صبح ہمیں بتایا, یہ انفارم کیا. لیکن اوور آل دا ٹرینڈ از الارمنگ, اینڈ دس مے ناٹ اپلائی ٹو مائنورٹیز ایز سچ, کیونکہ جہاں تک لوگ ابھی جو اریسٹ ہوئے ہیں وہ زیادہ تر تو مسلم کمیونٹی سے ہیں. لیکن کیا یہ ایکسٹینڈ ہو کر ریلیجس مائنورٹیز کے اوپر نہیں ہوگا اس کا افیکٹ؟ یہ ایک بہت ضروری سوال ہے جو ہمیں پوچھنا چاہیے. ان فیکٹ this should not be happening at all. So I would like Justice Sharam to address this question and tell me, why is this happening? Why are the courts under so much pressure? I mean, why can they not let these cases, why can they not allow these cases to run in court as they should?
The courts too, last line. Why they're not allowing the courts, the cases to
run in court? Matlab, a pressure group, they are running, but they are very much under pressure at certain times.
Well, that you know, that you are right, that blasphemy cases, I mean,
and forced conversion
very
cases.
frankly, concerning 295 ABC, these cases are always, you know, very sensitive in nature for the reason the security. You know, in a society, in a vulnerable society like ours, we have to be slightly careful because there are incidents which I can quote you, and I believe you might be knowing that. That is the reason for the sensitivity of those cases. But I can assure you, we have, right now I am sitting at Multan bench of Lahore High Court. We have very few, presently I am deciding the murder appeals for the year 2023. I have finished 2022, the death sentence appeals. And now I've entered into 2023, and as of day before yesterday, probably there were only 48 left, the murder references of 2023. And so I have requisitioned the data from the Office of High Court that tell me how many other cases, like we call them CSR, capital sentence references, and murder references. So I think, so far as that, right now I can speak about Multan bench because I'm sitting there, that we are all up to date up to 2023. Well, yes, if by the time my roster is not over, if I'll overcome 2023, I will enter into 2024 after finishing all these criminal appeals. That's what I can say, you know. And I can't say about others, I can only say about myself that what I have done so far regarding these cases of 295 A, B, C, and other capital sentence references. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to a separate kind of a kind of discrimination that religious minorities face, and this is working class minorities जिनके साथ ज़्यादती होती है, जिनके साथ डिस्क्रिमिनेशन होता है, उनको इक्वल पे नहीं मिलती, उनको इक्वल जॉब्स की एक्सेस नहीं होती. और इसके ऊपर मैरी जेम्स ने काफ़ी ज़्यादा काम किया हुआ है. शी हैज़ डन अ लॉट ऑफ वर्क ऑन स्वीपर्स एंड सैनिटेशन वर्कर्स, सैनिटरी वर्कर्स इन स्पेशली इन पंजाब, and how they face this kind of discrimination. Mary, in your work, have you seen religion being politicized, and how? And what would you like to say? How does this reinforce their social exclusion?
Thank you very much, Zari. It's a great honor, and I think platforms like that are our only hope where we can speak about such challenges. But I'd like to put another question, which is a bit complex but very relevant to what we are trying to discuss. It's not just the politicization of religion we're talking about, but more like, for me, the question has been, how has the state's homogenization of religious minorities politicized religion and deepened the socio-economic and political marginalization of the most vulnerable minority communities in Pakistan? So for past several years, our work has been, and most importantly, to understand this hypothesis, it's important to look at the composition of religious minorities in Pakistan, or overall religious composition. So as per 2023, Islam is a state religion. Muslim communities of 96.47%. Hindus, they make up to 2.17%, but there are two categories, Hindu Jati, they are 1.73% as per the census, and the scheduled caste Hindu 0.41%. Now they have raised 0.57%. Ahmadiyas, they have, their current population is 0.7%. Others include Baha'is, Buddhists, Jain, Jewish, Kailash, and now Sikh, they have a separate category, and they are overall 15,998,000. So it shows that predominantly we have 96% of the Muslim population. There are less than 4% of populations we are talking about. And more importantly, when we talk about marginalization, especially socioeconomic and political marginalization of certain minority communities, it is important to look at each minority group differently. I'm not going into details, but I'll share a case study that we did in 2024 general elections, exactly 2 years back, trying to understand these dynamics. And NA 127 was the hotspot, because 60,000 Christian voters right in the heart of Lahore, and we were able to speak to around 8,000 voters there. So, 60,000 means that every political party was of the view that Christians have the swing vote, and if we are able to woo them, we'll be able to win the elections. So with those 8,142 Christian respondents, we listed at least 25 challenges or issues or problems they were facing, including the issues that we have discussed here, like forced conversions, blasphemy, or their mode of elections. But among all of them, around, 44% women, 56% men, and we saw that more than 6,000 people, their top priority was provision of gas, clean drinking water, sewage, roads, garbage, employment, education. Only 124 people said that we want political representation of our own in the assemblies. Only 27 said that forced conversion was an issue. And very few also mentioned blasphemy as a top issue. So this hypothesis that we try to verify with this big, it's a population census we're talking about, that 8,000 people all coming. So this framework actually helped us provide, and before that, the work we did, how certain religious minorities are privileged and some are marginalized. So homogenizing all these minority groups has damaged us more than anything that we are talking about here. And without dehomogenizing and looking at each minority group with the size of their population, For example, when we talk about, but I'll focus Christians here more because having largest concentration in Punjab, and Christians being 1.3% of 3.7% of the total population, it shows that they're disproportionately represented in menial jobs, including sanitation work. So look at the formation of any municipality, and you will see that despite the fact that in past several years, due to our campaign, and I take pride in that identity, I have worked on so many things as a human rights lawyer, as a policy analyst, as part of parliament, but I have seen that this work has given more credibility to understand, and the only religious minority community that has been stigmatized with the word, with the N word, the slur chuda that we don't even want to hear. And my desire or my fury has been, that started back in 2014 when I came into public life, that why only Christians are required as sweepers, and how Christian, sanitation worker, and chuda have become synonymous to each other. And it doesn't matter if I'm not working in a sanitation work. So it is very much pertinent and relevant to all the questions we are asking here, that this socio-economic and political marginalization of certain minority groups have put them in a position where they cannot even speak about it, and most importantly, where we do not talk about the context, the history, why we have reached to that situation. And even if we have the most empowered Minority Rights Commission here, are we going to look at the structural issues that have reached us to this level, that even if it's Jallianwala, the people who were accused of blasphemy, they were sanitation workers. What happened in Joseph Colony? He was a sanitation worker. And how the most vulnerable communities, especially in Punjab, Christians who are highly concentrated in slums, informal neighborhoods, who are predominantly, overwhelmingly employed in menial jobs like domestic work and sanitation work, bricklaying work, agri work. So all these kind of this, so I mean, for me, it is very important to understand the history, the context, how we started, how Pakistan has looked at religion, and it's not post 1947. I want to make very sure that there's this context, and just by referring to August's speech does not solve everything. Just because founding father wanted this that way, what happened with minorities afterwards, and more importantly, and I'm going to conclude it here, Section 263, the second amendment, homogenizing and making a clear distinction who is Muslim and non-Muslim, has put most marginalized communities by declaring Ahmadis and clubbing them with other religious minorities groups,
Yes.
have done more damage than anything else. And I think it is important for us to look at each religious minority differently in order to understand their political marginalization and their socio-economic underprivileged status. And without that, we cannot make any recommendations. And until we are ready to look at, in the historical perspective, that how we have reached there, it will be very difficult. And especially the forced conversion issues. Have you ever seen any high caste or any upper class young girl or woman being converted to another religion? So any minor cases of early child marriage or forced conversions, they all are coming from the same caste marginalized religious minority groups. And it is not just the forced conversion, but ideologically motivated sexual grooming as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'll ask Mr. Ahmed Shahid, how do Pakistan's challenges in protecting its religious minorities, since you have been you are the former UN Rapporteur on freedom of religion and belief, how do you see Pakistan with regard to its GSP plus trade commitments? Because we are lagging far behind in implementing.
Thank you very much for that question. It's a real honor to be here at Asma Jahangir conference. Asma was a good friend of mine, a collaborator within the UN system, also in the Maldives where I come from, also at Geneva on a think tank we both set up. So it's a real honor to be here and speak at this conference. Yes, you are right. GSP does require Pakistan to uphold 27 commitments or agreements on human rights commitments and other things. And if you look at the latest review, you will see that the trend noted in the review from 2 years back is that Pakistan is failing in upholding its commitments, and there are specific elements mentioned in this. So for today's panel conversations, I think the reference to the Ahmadi situation is important. Reference to the other aspects of religious freedom, including Christian situation, is important. The point about structural discrimination that you referred to, Mary, is also important, noted there. So there are, if you like, warning signs in the last review that Pakistan is advised to improve before the next round, which is from one and a half years' time from now. But of course, we should be looking at the GSP as one of many opportunities for us to advocate for better rights in Pakistan. It's only one. And if you look at the GSP reports, they're written by, I would say, civil servants or bureaucrats. Therefore, a lot of the language we speak to empower rights holders is absent from there. So it's important to look at how that can be framed. So today's panel about politicization of religion, I want to highlight that when you mix religion and politics, the profane and the sacred both corrupt themselves. You can no longer really practice a faith if it has been taken off for political reasons. It becomes something else. Faith teaches from around the world humility, love, compassion, justice, fairness. When you begin to politics, it triggers you to become arrogant, power-seeking, power-hungry, greedy, and corrupt. So you can't actually have the two together. What you get as a result is extremism. In any country where you have religion coming to the public space, then fear driven across society, chilling expression across everybody. You have blasphemy laws put in place just to do that work, and without exception, the weight falls upon the weakest, because what you get is scapegoating. You bring religion to say things will be better, but things don't work better. You blame somebody, find someone to blame. And that's the person who's the weakest, and therefore it's not surprising that here as and elsewhere that the axe falls on the most vulnerable. That's something very important to bear in mind. But let me also reflect on what we can do moving forward. I am very encouraged by this conference. I think events like these that bring together such committed actors here is so important to energize all of us and to draw support from each of us. And that's very, 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 very vital. At the same time, we should also try to understand what's happening here. So when you speak of religious freedom, people don't really get what's at stake here. Compared to race, for example, if what we heard today was linked to race, well, we know it's apartheid. We call it apartheid. We know it's wrong, and we all rise against it. But religious discrimination, or we find excuses, this and that religion. So if we had to reframe our debates to look at that this actually becoming a racism as part of how we racialize communities, and therefore should respond in that strong fashion. So very strong reaction against this form of discrimination is very important. And I just also highlight the importance of reliable, objective facts, documented facts, updated regularly, so we have an informed conversation as to what is going here. It's very, very important. I should reinforce that of being specific. For every community, specificities of what's going on there. We should understand that. If we understand specificities, we can respond to the needs people have. So it's very, very important to do that. Equally important, of course, is improving literacy. Very often, well-meaning people wish to bring religion to a public space without realizing what harm they are creating. So I think there should be a broader understanding of the harms that this creates in public life, and also of the religious teachings that actually talk about compassion, brotherhood, and fairness and justice. And you undermine all these values by doing that. So that literacy is important to advance as well, so that we actually question when people hail religion as the answer to everything, when it was supposed to be do that. Third, of course, is that of education, linked to that. Education of everybody, making sure they have access to education and proper resources, because disinformation can really undermine our own efforts as well. Then multi-level engagement. I say this with some humility because I don't really know Pakistan that well, but in other countries, multi-level engagement, the legal sector, parliamentarians, municipal actors, when they come together, they do a little better than the politicians seeking office, because municipal actors have a real need, making the community work today, work tonight and tomorrow as well. Whereas the politician possibly wants to create division so they can get the vote bank done better next time around. So there is that difference of the levels you mobilize. So multi-level mobilization is very, very, very important. Also build state capacity. Along with the GSP review, EU, among others, many are here today, offer Pakistan aid and others aid here for capacity building. So important to use that aid to build up the legal capacity of the country, along with other actors here, society actors, the media, and so on and so forth. So there is a, if you like, enhanced capacity here. And finally, I can go on, but finally I want to also highlight the importance of the intermestic links here. Now, Pakistan is a world leader in trying to address the issues Muslims face as minorities outside of Pakistan. Now, that work gets impeded because of what's happening in Pakistan, because people point out to the discrepancy in that. So really, if Pakistan wants to help Muslims living abroad, as I do in the UK, then it must also do better at home. And that means linking up across boundaries of those living abroad, those living here, to see how we can all work together to uplift all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ahmed. Should we open the floor for just a couple of questions? We don't have much time, but I think it would serve for the audience to interact a little. अगर किसी के पास कोई सवाल है हमारे panelists से, तो please अभी जी please.
Thank you. I have one comment and one question.
जी, you can address the panel, please.
Okay. First of all, I have comment that this is a topic is quite sensitive and it is dealt very efficiently and precisely. Thank you. It is wonderful to initiate debate on such kind of issue. The question is, what is the reason of this radical mindset, the way our majority behave, and what's its etiology? Because if we look in this matter without addressing this issue, we cannot tackle this issue only by through legislation, because it requires social change also. Thank you.
जी, मेरा नाम अशकनाज खोकर है, मैं ह्यूमन राइट्स एक्टिविस्ट हूँ. मेरा बस यही सवाल है कि मुझे बताइए कि जिस तरीके से मैरी गिल ने या जिया जग्गी ने बताया कि या खेल साहब ने भी बताया कि एक बच्ची है जिसके ऊपर 10 साल 12 साल या 13 साल है, और रिस्ट्रेंट एक्ट के तहत 16 साल पंजाब में नहीं हो सकती शादी और 18 साल सिंध में नहीं हो सकती. लेकिन जो बच्चे अक़लियत के साथ जिसका ताल्लुक़ है, वो चाहे मसीही है, चाहे वो हिंदू है, चाहे वो सिख है, अगर उसको कोई मुस्लिम शख्स ले जाता है और उसकी उम्र 9 साल है, 10 साल है, 12 साल है, और जब उसके ऊपर एक फतवा दे दीजिएगा तो कि इसने शी इज़ कन्वर्टेड टू इस्लाम, तो हम उसको वापस नहीं ले आते. इसके ऊपर अदालतें भी खामोश है, हुकूमतें भी खामोश है, हमारे कवानीन भी इसके ऊपर नापैद हो जाते हैं. दूसरा सवाल मुझे ये पूछना था कि आपने एक बात की कि जो मेजॉरिटी केसेस ऑफ ब्लास्फेमीज़ हैं वो मुस्लिम्स के हवाले से होते हैं, लेकिन मॉब वायलेंस जो मॉब लिंचिंग जो है वो सिर्फ अक़लियतों के हवाले से होते हैं. जोसेफ कॉलोनी ले लें, बदामी बाग ले लें, आप जड़ावाला ले लें, तमाम की तमाम कॉलोनियाँ जो आप जला देते हैं, शांति नगर आप जला देते हैं, सिर्फ इस वजह से क्योंकि एक क्रिश्चियन ने या एक हिंदू ने ब्लास्फेमी की है. लेकिन जब वही ब्लास्फेमी मुसलमान करता है तो उस पर जो है कानून भी खामोश रहता है, उससे उसको ही शिकार बनाया जाता है, ना कि उसकी पूरी कम्युनिटी को.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, नमस्ते. मेरा नाम खेताराम है, एडवोकेट खेताराम है, और मैं प्रैक्टिसिंग लॉयर हूँ. मेरा सर शेराम सरवर साहब से, जस्टिस शेराम सरवर साहब से सवाल होगा कि यहाँ पे मैं लाहौर में प्रैक्टिस करता हूँ, और जब मैं कहता हूँ कि मेरा नाम खेताराम है, जब कोई जज साहब से मेरी बात होती है या किसी वकील साहब से, तो मुझे एक फीलिंग आती है कि आसपास में जो हमारे वकला साहिबान खड़े होते हैं, साइलिन खड़े होते हैं, इवन के जज साहब भी खड़े होते हैं, वो कहते हैं कि आप कभी कभार ये कहते हैं कि आप इंडिया से आए हैं. तो मुझे एक आइडेंटिटी का, हमें एक पढ़ा लिखे लोग जो वकील हैं या जज हैं, अगर वो ऐसी बात करेंगे तो हम फिर किधर जाएं? एक ये मेरा सवाल है जो मैं एक्सपेक्ट करता हूँ कि आप मुझे जवाब देंगे. दूसरा मेरा शॉर्ट क्वेश्चन आपसे ये है कि हमने मिनॉरिटीज़ के अंदर उनको इतना ही बार दिया है कि यहाँ पे हमारे जो सिख भाई हैं उनके लिए वाघा बॉर्डर खोल दिया जाता है, जबकि पाकिस्तान में जो हम 45 लाख हिंदू रहते हैं उनके लिए जो वाघा बॉर्डर अभी भी बंद है. हम अपनी इबादत गाहे या हम अपने मंदिर जो हम ऐसे कहते हैं कि जब मुसलमानों को काबे और उनको लिए रोक दिया जाता है तो बड़ा मसला है. हम हिंदुओं को काफ़ी सालों से रोक दिया गया है, तो इस पे भी मैं एक्सपेक्ट करता हूँ कि आप जवाब दें. थैंक यू सो मच.
Thank you.
Please, may I answer him? May I give him the answer?
जी जस्टिस साहब.
Please repeat your name. What's your name? Khetaram. Khetaram, what are the last word of my name, my first name? If you can reproduce, please. What? RAM, right? What is that? RAM. Am I right? So I have a synonymous with you, my friend. There is a similarity between you and myself. And yes, my name is also, I don't know why my parents chose to, put this name, But somehow there must be some wisdom behind that. I believe my parents were wise people. I have also an unusual name. So whenever I have to appear, in the early days of my practice, I have to repeat my names twice or thrice, that it is Shahram. You got it? So it doesn't really matter, don't worry about that. You come and appear before me, I'll call you with your first name, and not once, rather many times. Or you can ask your colleagues here in Lahore that I always address the councils, always try to address the councils with their first name, because I know many people. I am from Lahore as well. So Khetaram, don't you worry about that. It is nothing to worry about. If you will argue well, if you will plead well, your name will, it will be never forgotten. And that will make a mark for you. Number one. Number two, your second query was regarding the visa policy. That is between India and Pakistan. India gives the visa to Pakistani people, or Pakistan gave the visa to the Indian people. So if you're not allowed to cross the border, something is wrong somewhere else, my friend. That's across the wall, not with us. So be brave. You have a very nice name. Me and you are brothers, having same end figures. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy your stay in Lahore.
I think, Mary, you were saying something about the
I'm sorry, but-
radicalization of...
Yes, I'm really sorry. I come from a lawyer's background and lawyer's family, and it hurts me seeing when Mumtaz Qadri was entering, and there were lawyers who were handing over garlands to him. And I also come from a place where I have been subjected to harassment in courts while defending two people who were accused of, especially in Rimsha Masih's case in Islamabad. I was newly enrolled as advocate high court. So I mean, there are examples, and I'm sorry to say that radicalization that the question was asked, that religious radicalization, it hasn't left any space, including the legal fraternity, that I'm very, very proud of. And I'm sure spaces like these, people like Shahram Saab and other eminent people up here, they will do their best to at least clean up the judicial and legal fraternity with this radicalization. That is my first thing. And also answering to the question that Ashkenaz asked, we must talk about structural discrimination. This is not one incident of mob violence, one incident of forced conversion. It's not a case per case. It is about the structural issue, structural radicalization that we are afraid to talk about. And we talk about women when they are forcibly converted or married at early age. No one is talking about what was happening to that girl before that marriage and after, what happened afterwards. And we have been able to document those horrible stories, how they were allured into that relationship early and then how they were discarded soon
And Mary,
after marriage.
I think, if I'm not wrong, there was an alarming statistic of around 1,000 girls in a year.
I think that we were not able to substantiate that evidence, but we do have ample evidence to believe that most of these cases, either you call it forcible conversion, abduction, whatever, but there has been a strong element of sexual grooming involved in that. And we haven't been talking about it, and how those girls have been discarded afterwards with their kids. Their kids hold Islamic identities, but they are not accepted by their communities. How they have not been accepted even the communities they get married into, and how they have these sets of issues they face of untouchability, of forcible practicing Islam in those households. And also the mob violence, I think this is an absurd argument stating that Muslims, they get more, they are more accused of blasphemy charges, what he has rightly pointed out. And we have evidence, we have statistics believing that Christians in particular, after Ahmadis, they have been disproportionately affected by these cases, and mob violence, lynching of those cases is higher as compared to their population size. So if they are only 1.37%, and look at the cases and look at the kind of effects they have across Pakistan. So these elements are very, very, very important.
All right, thank you, everybody. I would just like to wrap up this panel now, because I think we're ready to head off to the other panel. And Jaya, would you like to just give one conclusion? Just make it very short. Wrap it up.
Maybe I'm not sure what's the definition of short for you, but just to respond to Zulkarnain, I was already wondering what's the mindset of radicalized individuals or terrorism, and I was just thinking all our poetry, for example, एक बचपन में हम कहानी पढ़ते थे या पोएम आती है कि छम 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 अम्मी मारेंगी अबू डांटेंगे. क्यों अम्मी और अबू मारेंगे और डांटेंगे? क्यों वो प्यार नहीं कर सकते? Why our stories always keep on amplifying violent extremism? All these stories actually built up on that. And for example, I grew up listening to 8, where violence was appreciated. Parents' violence was appreciated.
Do you have a
also, this
recommendation that you would
nationalism.
give? A recommendation?
And this is what translates in the violence with minorities. When you say we are proud to be Muslims, we are blessed to be Muslims, the essence that carries is the superiority, and it translates into your actions. And what he asked about why I really don't know. If you read the judgments of the cases on forced faith conversions, जहाँ पे ये कहा जाता है कि बच्ची को अबडक्टर के साथ जाने दें, बट जो माँ बाप की भेड़ बकरियाँ उठाई थी पुलिस ने उनको वापस कर दें. सो आई फील लाइक लोगों को फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता कि किसके घर की बच्ची घर में बैठी है, किसकी नहीं है, बिकॉज वी रियली डोंट केयर अबाउट वेमेंस लाइफ, माइनॉरिटी वेमेंस लाइफ एंड वेमेन इन जनरल.
थैंक यू सो मच. शुक्रिया बहुत बहुत आप लोग सबके आने का. थैंक यू सो मच.